Next from Springfield, U.S. Representative Rodney Davis talks about the need to update mass transit in the capital city as well as throughout Illinois. This runs about 20 minutes.
First off, I'm glad to be joined by the folks from the Springfield Mass Transit District here at their transit center. This is, obviously a temporary transit center because long-term, a project that I'm glad I've worked with city leaders and mass transit district leaders and county leaders on to hopefully move this transit center in a multimodal facility closer to 10th Street to see Springfield's long-term vision come to fruition, to have a multimodal bus and rail facility on between the 9th and 10th Street corridors. But I'm here today to talk about the importance of mass transit. Mass transit matters in my congressional district. I go to Washington, D.C., and they don't think somebody who represents a district in the midst of cornfields and soybean fields is too concerned about mass transit. But with 4 public universities in my district and many urban areas like Springfield, when you look at Springfield compared to larger metropolitan areas, mass transit is important. It's important for many people in our communities to go get to their workplace. It's important for students to get home and go actually pursue higher educational goals. So I'm proud to have been one of the leaders in Washington in passing a long-term transportation bill. It's something that I actually campaigned on the first time that I ran for office. It wasn't a very popular position to take, to say we needed to invest more in infrastructure, more in mass transit, more in transportation. But I'm glad that we were able to pass the first long-term transportation bill in 10 years just last year. And what does that mean for the Springfield Mass Transit District? It means a stable source of funding that they can go after on a regular basis and a competitive basis to actually help increase opportunities for better buses, newer buses, and better facilities. These are why federal investments in mass transit are important to communities like Springfield, and also the places I visited the last few days reiterated that. I was in Champaign earlier today with the Champaign Mass Transit District, and I was also in Bloomington yesterday with Connect Transit, and we saw what they were doing in those communities to help build out their mass transit network so that they could continue to grow opportunities, economic growth, and also grow the number of students that our universities could handle, which in turn gives us a chance to recruit the best and the brightest right here in Illinois. So with that, I'm happy to answer any questions.
Isn't it the case that the Republican platform at the convention said that that gas tax money or transportation money should go less to mass transit and more to highways because that's just a big city thing?
Well, it's the same surprise that people have when they find out I represent a district where mass transit's so important. And as you know, Bernie, I don't agree with anybody 100% of the time, even the platform of the Republican Party, which I've never read.
How much does Springfield Mass Transit District get a year in federal funding? Do we happen to know?
I don't have the exact answer. Frank?
It depends right now based on certain criteria that are calculated every year, so it varies.
Is it like 900,000 or a million? Or
it's about 900, I think, Bernie,
about
but
900?
We can verify,
okay.
But sometimes it goes down a touch or up a touch, depending if we meet certain criteria on ridership.
Well, the good news is, too, we have a stable funding source for 5 years, which many mass transit districts have not had over the life of the last long-term or short-term transportation bill. But I do know, after meeting with the folks here, there's right now $6.7 million in federal funds that are being spent on projects within Springfield Mass Transit District.
Should we be looking?
What do you think about the constitutional amendment that voters will have for transport to make the state funds go directly for transportation, not be swept?
Well, I don't know enough about the amendment to make a decision right now, but I'm looking forward to talking with those who are for and anybody who may be against to talk about what's best.
So you haven't voted yet?
No.
Okay.
Have you?
Not yet. I love election day voting, but that's just a thing. Just to clear up something from the past, you have said...
Let's do mass transit
Sure,
stuff first,
okay.
And then we'll go do the rest.
We're going to talk to you on the bus. So.
Okay, you got me on the bus?
Okay.
Springfield Mass Transit, do you guys have a position on the constitutional amendment? I mean, the trucking people would say that to the extent that cities around Illinois get some of this funds, it will be guaranteeing that the cities will get it instead of it being swept by the state.
We'll evaluate it on its merits and read the whole bill.
You haven't done that as yet?
Not at this point, no.
Well, the idea is you couldn't spend transportation money on anything else.
But we'll review it.
It's pretty tough, I think, for a public agency to take a position on a ballot initiative, too.
Okay.
How much money do you get from the state, do you know?
This year's budget's approximately...
Can you move most closer to his microphone?
I'm sorry. This year's budget's approximately $16 million worth of downstate operating assistance program money through the state.
And have you had problems with funds being swept by the state to where you don't get your what you had budgeted for?
Not at this point, but we're always in fear that that day could happen at any time. Currently, the district receives 65% funding reimbursement through the state, and we're more worried that it could drop back to, let's say, 55%, and then we would really have to reevaluate everything that we do to ensure that we meet the goals of ensuring transportation for our ridership.
If you had the money...
Maintaining our ridership, I'm sorry.
If you had the money that you would like to have, what are your priorities? Is it just more buses? Are you going to do something aside from buses? What would we gain?
If you're asking about in a perfect world, funding would be, if we had funding that we wanted and said, this is the amount, pardon me, let me start again.
If you could fulfill your strategic plan, what would it be?
It would begin with service that we have currently right now, Monday through Friday night till midnight. We would, through Saturday night, which we just started a couple weeks ago. We would then extend service into Sundays and increase the routes that the buses have and frequency of the routes.
How's your fleet? Is it aging?
Our fleet needs to be updated. We're hoping for funding to update the fleet with new additional buses. However, a bus is $400,000, and it takes a lot of money to buy just one alone. And we would love to have about 20 of them.
And Congressman, as you look at your whole district, it's not just Springfield, obviously. What are the needs in other cities that you're hearing from other members of the mass transit family?
Well, they want certainty. They want opportunities to have not only their formula funds that come on an annual basis, but the opportunity to compete against other communities for some other priorities that they may have within their district. That's a common theme, and the good thing is we gave mass transit districts a lot more certainty than they've had over the last 10 years by passing our long-term transportation bill, the FAST Act, in a very bipartisan way. These are the things that I went to Washington to do, to legislate, to work with both sides, to actually get things done and allow our local entities like the Springfield Mass Transit District to have that certainty that they've come to me asking for in the past.
Do you see this, I don't mean to dominate here, but do you see this
Sure you don't.
mass transit, how does it fit into the broader scheme of turning Illinois' budget around and economic development?
Well, I don't know how it's going to fit into the scheme of how the state of Illinois is going to turn around their issues. But what I can tell you is to have economic growth in communities like Springfield, mass transit is a must for folks who are trying to go find that job that's going to lead to a career and get them out into the community to achieve their dream, their American dream.
These millennials, a big chunk of them who don't want to have a car, kids who turn 16 don't care about getting a license. How does that fit into this conversation?
Well, it's sure not my kids. They've stolen my truck from me. I go outside my garage and realize I don't have a car some days because my twin boys have overtaken my vehicle. That's something that, especially as communities continue to grow in urban areas, we've seen that phenomenon. And I bet it would come to communities like Springfield. So that's why we need to invest in mass transit opportunities now. But it's also not just for a certain generation. It's for those who are trying to build a new career, build a new life, get that job that they've always dreamed of, and they may not have the ability to have multiple vehicles in their household. That's why what we do here today, standing here at the Transit Center, is so important to their success and their ability to achieve their dreams.
Should we look with any sort of jaundiced eye at the fact that the congressman who's up for election in about 5 weeks is traveling around riding on buses in various cities and dragging out local officials to be with him at this time? Isn't it a little campaign ad-ish?
No, because because the campaign season happens doesn't mean I stop doing my job. And anybody that knows me knows that I've always been interested in highlighting the benefits of transportation in my district. So this isn't anything out of the ordinary for me. And frankly, as I look around at everybody who's standing here, it shouldn't be out of the ordinary for any of you to hear me talk about this.
We always love to hear you talk. Now, has the Ag Advisory Committee to Mr. Trump met yet?
Not that I know of.
Okay, so that you're on it, but you haven't been asked to advise yet.
Nope.
Okay. The revelation that he apparently took a $900+ million deduction one year and possibly didn't pay taxes for a number of years after that, does that shake your confidence in your candidate at all for someone who hasn't, perhaps some might say, not done his part, or has he done his part by taking the deduction?
I think as you've seen polling, both candidates have the highest unfavorable ratings of any presidential candidates in our nation's history since polling began. So I think we could probably stand here for hours and talk about the deficiencies of both candidates. But the voters are the ones who chose those candidates. I didn't choose those candidates. I voted for somebody else. I endorsed Marco Rubio for president. So the voters, your readers, their viewers, their listeners are the ones who chose the two presidential candidates. And now it's up to us as voters to choose who's going to do the best job.
And you're voting for Trump?
Yes.
Okay, that's fine.
What did you think of the VP debate?
Oh, I thought Mike Pence was amazing. I thought Mike Pence showed America why he was chosen to be vice president, why, and if we saw a disaster where the vice president needed to replace a president, why Mike Pence could easily step into that office. He's somebody who showed the American people last night that he has the common sense that we need in America right now, and he's going to make a great vice president.
Flip the Ticket was trending last night after the debate. Do you think that Mike Pence outshined the actual nominee?
Well, the voters didn't get a chance to choose Mike Pence. The voters are the ones who chose our two candidates.
And what effect does the vice presidential debate have in the whole process overall? Does it move a point or two or less, or can you tell?
History shows us it really doesn't matter. I mean, look, I was a freshman in college when Lloyd Benson delivered that just hit on Dan Quayle, but Lloyd Benson was never the vice president. Dan Quayle was.
Okay. Really quick question.
Let me ask you, can you update us on the WOTUS and the effort to get some funds to rebuild those locks and dams?
Well, WOTUS is different than the funds to rebuild the locks and dams. WOTUS, WOTUS is, we're still trying to fight that overreach by this administration. But the Obama administration is dead set on pushing through rules in the regulatory environment that can cost taxpayers billions. And they want to do it on their way out because they weren't successful at the ballot box, and they don't want to run it through Congress because they know our common sense approach is not going to jive with their ability to actually repay political favors to those who put them in office. And that's exactly what this WOTUS rule is.
Can you explain it for those who don't know?
So Waters of the U.S. rule, which I believe and evidence, in my opinion, clearly shows, is an overreach into even drainage ditches in neighborhoods that could impact so many in our community. EPA does not need to be the watchdog of every raindrop that falls into our gutters in our subdivisions and neighborhoods, and that's exactly what they're trying to do. Now, when it comes to locks and dams, we're working on, we just passed another WRDA bill. We got back on our 2-year track. Remember, it was from 2006, 2007, the last time we had a long-term water infrastructure bill. And just like we talk about mass transit and highways and bridges in our highway bill, we have to have that same language for our water highways. Look at the navigation channel along the Mississippi and the Illinois waterways as our highways to get products out into the global marketplace. And we passed that bill just last week, and we're going to continue to push for new and innovative approaches to help fund our lock and dam improvements, which have gone nowhere in the last 20 years with the status quo. One amendment I had actually would allow the Comptroller General to study new ways to help implement the Inland Waterway Trust Fund, which is crucial to upgrading our system.
Any funds attached to WRDA yet?
Well, that's authorizing language. Remember, we are an authorizing committee on the Transportation Infrastructure Committee. The Appropriations Committee has to match up the money. That's the way Congress operates. So we put the authorizing language in place. We think it saves taxpayers billions of dollars and also pinpoints where our priorities need to be. But it's the president who hasn't prioritized upgrading the locks and dams along the Mississippi and Illinois rivers. He has zeroed out funding in that category called NESP, that would actually move that project along. So his priority has been to do nothing along our corridors. My priority is to do everything, do what they were promised they were going to do 20 years ago.
Any thoughts on getting the conversation going on the farm bill?
Oh, we're beginning that debate too. Now we're at the stage where the farm bill policies that we put in place that saved $23 billion in mandatory spending just a few short years ago. I will remind folks that was the largest single spending cut in mandatory spending we had my entire first term in Congress. That bill is now being implemented, and we're beginning the discussions on what may be deficient, what USDA may be doing well. And I actually want to give Tom Vilsack, our Secretary of Ag, a lot of credit in working with us. He's somebody who has shown a determination to work with Congress, and I think that shows why the USDA has been a very successful agency.
Just any thoughts, and I'll shut up for good, just on whether ag issues, any frustration that you don't really hear about in the presidential race at all at this point, it seems.
You know, the fact that we don't hear about ag a lot, I think shows that we've actually solved many of the issues that were part of the debate when I first ran for Congress 3.5 short years ago. So that's a good sign when the presidential race is not talking about it. But the presidential race clearly has been focusing on the failures of this administration, the foreign policy level, and also with anemic economic growth.
You're watching the Illinois Channel, an independent nonprofit corporation formed to provide gavel-to-gavel coverage of Illinois state government and other public affairs events taking place across Illinois.